Over to the back to the SEC, I should say. Vanderbilt at number 6, Florida. And looking at the point spread here on the open, Florida minus 12.5, juiced in their direction. Total of 155.5. Gators coming off of a blowout loss over the weekend to Kentucky. We touched on that one on Friday's episode to beat the closing number. And Vanderbilt has been up and down here in league play. They had a couple big back-to-back wins over Tennessee and Kentucky, for that matter. And sandwiched in between them, blowout loss at Alabama, 30-point loss at Oklahoma to Porter Moser's Sooners. And Oklahoma, by the way, in SEC play, talk about three-point variance, shooting 40% from three and allowing a 29.7% clip. But I digress here, Justin. What say you in Gainesville?
Give me the road dog. Give me the double-digit points. Give me the 13.5, which is where I took it already. And I think this is a really nice spot. I thought I was hopefully going to get 14.5, but I was even late to that, playing in Monday afternoon. Look, Florida is a very good team. There's no doubt about it. We do have them ranked as a top 5 offense, but their defense has been largely overperforming, and in conference play as well. They're expected to be allowing 56% shooting at the rim so far this season. They are in conference play alone, and they are allowing 35% of shots at the rim. So an extra 5% from what's actually happening on 35%. You can start to understand these little points add up. Opponents are shooting just 29% against them in SEC play from 3, and they allow a lot of shots from 3. 43% of shots against them are from deep, and again, that 29% probably just not going to maintain. Likely a estimation of their defense based on that, and that's how it works. That's how the efficiency models work. That's how Ken Palm works. That's how Haslametrics works. How Bart Torvik works. How Evmia works, and it's okay, right? I mean, that's how basketball works. So that's the way the efficiencies should also work. But what we're trying to get at is predicting the future, not telling you what has already happened, right? That's the very big difference. And that's what the pitfalls can be when you try to predict based on what's already happened. You want to predict on, the way the game was played, because sometimes the results don't line up with the process. And it's actually a lot of the time. It's probably 30 to 40% of the times. So it's college basketball. I mean, watch the game for 2 years. You'll agree with me. But Vandy, the defense, honestly, has looked great. I think their defense is primed to improve, and they come at a discount here, expected to have opponents shooting much worse against them, seeing a 41% clip of long-range threes go down against the Commodores. So, yeah, again, great play. Very, very rare for me to have such strong feelings on an SEC line. This is usually such a strong, conference with such liquidity on these bets that it gets figured out, and I do think this one will get figured out. But I do not expect 13, 14 to last a long time. 13.5 I think is already gone. I don't even know if you can. It might probably be 12.5 tomorrow morning.
It is gone, yeah.
Right. So 14.5. 14 is the Ken Palm number. I would 12.5 fine. I think this is a single digit game. So I wouldn't really go anywhere beneath 12.5. But there's reason to think that Vanderbilt continues to do what they've done. A couple 1-point losses that shot quality expected to be wins. They aren't exactly a talent oasis. I don't even know how you complete that analogy, but they aren't compared to the rest of the SEC. So maybe that happens a little bit. They kind of get in a little bit of trouble with some of that disparity and shot quality. Maybe stumbles a little bit and gives them a little too much credit. But 13.5, 12.5 feel great. I like that play a lot. I don't know if it would be a full unit, but it's definitely on my card.
So, devil's advocate here, because I'm not going to have a bet on this one.
Yeah.
I'm just a little concerned with, can Vandy, because in a high variance game, despite the fact that it's a double-digit point spread, you're going to need to attack the rim well. You're going to need a pretty stout 3-point clip to cover this number, for me at least, if you're Vanderbilt on the road. Vanderbilt doesn't really have the size to combat Florida's length, especially with Florida coming off that just disastrous loss in Knoxville at Tennessee over the weekend. They're going to be laser focused to win this game. Also, just thinking about the market perception, if we go back to a line that you hit on, you literally cashed with Mizzou and Florida going back to a few weeks ago. Mizzou was a 10.5-point dog, I want to say, at Florida. Yep. They got a lot of shot variance in that game. Now we're talking about a 2-point differential on the point spread against a worse Vanderbilt team. I don't see a ton of value there for me.
I understand. I do. I think that's fair. And again, the Missouri game, I was actually expected to be a loss from shot quality at home, which is pretty impressive. And again, that's kind of the game that they're going to have to play, right? Florida played a game where I think you'd maybe be surprised at how many threes they hit and still didn't win. I mean, they took, 54 shots in total, which is low. That's what it's going to have to be. And they got beat in that sense. Missouri won the possession battle. And I don't know if necessarily that's how it's going to go in this one, but that is kind of where at some level for Vandy, they're going to need to attack. And they definitely can struggle a little bit in forcing those turnovers. And maybe Walter Clayton just tears them up. But again, their defense is supposed to be so much better. What shot quality is seen out of the defense is that they are the best in the SEC. I mean, they rank third in shot quality defense in the nation. Crazy. It's a crazy thing to say. And it really all comes from the half-court defense, and they don't really see a lot of transition. They do a lot of good work in keeping you off balance, off the dribble. So, I think this is a good spot. It's a tough sell. I understand that, but sometimes the best bets are the toughest sells. The turnover forced rates are great, and it's not like they aren't seeing good competition. They don't allow opponents to get good spacing. I think sometimes it can be a little bit of like a surprise for opponents. And so maybe in that sense, you go first half and you take some points first half, and maybe Florida figures it out in the second half there, especially on the road. So maybe that's the angle to look at, but I definitely do think the value side is Vandy.
No, and it's fair points all around. And this is why I think this podcast is great for the listener and the viewer, whether you're catching this on YouTube or Apple, Spotify, wherever you find a favorite podcast. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. If you want to spread the word, we appreciate that as well. You look at Florida coming off of a blowout loss at Tennessee. Vanderbilt, same thing at Oklahoma. To me, that's not a game I want to get involved in just because situationally there's no edge. For you, you see the edge. So that's why I think it gives the viewer, listener, different perspectives on a single game and a handicap that can go a bunch of different ways.
I just got a text saying, quote, "No way Purdue opening 7.5. KP has -7 and Owen Freeman's certainly worth more than half a point." So I love my text messages on a Monday afternoon, Eli. I agree. And I agree with you too about the points here. It's a good combination because we don't really think the same way. We don't approach things the same way. I'm so heavily steeped in expected data that, it's essentially like having the presence of the algorithm here with you, and you approach things a lot more like holistically and use a lot of like the basketball that you see and a lot of how is this X's and O's matchup going to impose its will or get will imposed on. And I'm sort of here like, well, they develop good shots. And look, both have their merits. Both have their merits, and I do think it's an interesting game because at the end of the day, and I think anyone who really sits here and who's been listening with us the whole season and who's hanging out with us here in minute 40 of the podcast today, it's a game of can you beat KenPom, and I think for me personally, I found that the expected data gives you a really good leg up. I do think, like, at the end of the day, I love the way that you approach it, Eli, but I think, a lot of the time you're not seeing what other people aren't as much. Like, you might get there and you might have the right idea, but like, the margin that SQ, I feel like it's given me, and so reliably and with so little effort. Like, I swear, I do so much less work than I've ever done before just trusting the data. So it's great.
I will say.
Yeah, please.
I will say.
Yeah.
Yes, there's always a response there.
Of course. Let's make the podcast great.
Right. When it comes to understanding the market, because situationally that's
Right.
where it comes into play. Like Florida, this is where I'll give you credit here. Over the weekend, and a perfect example of this is Oregon coming off of a loss, blowout loss at UCLA. Market dents that one. Didn't open that far off of 7, but closes 7. And you could argue the line was inflated. Hindsight would agree with you because Nebraska wins the game outright. I bet the game live, lost it, whatever. In this situation, you're looking at Florida, the home tax being inflated, even though you're coming off of a loss situationally. So I'm generally in agreement with the market. My numbers, my rationale, my intuition is going to be generally in line with the market. You're going to be looking to combat that, looking to say, well, this line is inflated. So I that's where I don't think it's either of us missing something per se. I think it's truly looking at it from two different angles, and you saying this is too high, me saying either it's not high enough or it is right where it should be, and I'm not touching it. I bet it on open.
Yep.
Fair?
I think you nailed it. It's how it works. It's about sort of these overestimations to trying to essentially, and like we talked about it on like the past episode, I feel the spot tax in the way when I look at lines. And it's a different type of bobbing and weaving with it. So no, it'll be interesting to see. I think it makes for a fun dichotomy, and we have a good time with it.